If you haven't already, check out parts 1 and 2. So after Godzilla's epic battle saving the Earth from bioengineered aliens, our big green giant heads Midwest, where he's now taller than the mountains and trees in this one panel. Anyway, he comes across some cow remains and picks them up for some reason. Two men on horseback come along and see Godzilla dropping the bones, getting the idea that Godzilla feasted on cow. I mean, if he did, that would be an interesting coincidence to a deleted scene from the first film. The two get scared and run off. They go to a place called John Hawk's Ranch, where we find out that cattle has been disappearing, and the characters blame Godzilla for it. So, instead of alerting the authorities about it, this guy called Lefty suggests that they can take down Godzilla themselves, believing they can claim some reward for him. As incredibly dumb as that idea sounds, Hawks over here thinks that's a good idea, believing it would bring some excitement around here. Lefty goes off to warn the other ranchers about the idea, but stops to chat with another ranch owner named Bill Ford, whom, surprise, is the real culprit behind the missing cattle, and Lefty is his right-hand man. And that whole idea to take Godzilla on was just a way to cover up their tracks. Meanwhile, out on the range, a group of cowboys settle in to keep an eye out for the monster, but are taken back by a stampede of cow running out of terror because of Godzilla behind them. The cowboys then break into groups, one to try and steer the herd away from the cliff, and the other trying to fight off Godzilla. The only thing worth noting in that regard is that one of the men ride Godzilla's tail for a brief moment and stick some dynamite on it, which does look like it hurt Godzilla for a bit. There's also this one and only time that he sticks his tongue out like a reptile, and it kind of made me question if Godzilla's even considered a reptile. I don't know, what do you all think? Anyway, Godzilla smashes John Hawk's ranch, ending issue 15. Issue 16 opens with a night ending. The next morning, John Hawks holds a meeting to take down Godzilla and offers a reward in doing so. Hawks and a few dozen men meet up in a wasteland where Godzilla's been spotted, and they all charge in with just ropes, horses, and a few rifles. The whole fight is taken more so for laughs, if anything, with again another cowboy riding Godzilla and not taking the situation serious in the least. I think even the artist Herb Trimpe thought so too, as he draws this nice full page of the cowboys dashing towards Godzilla, with one of the men turning his head to the viewer and laughing to how silly this is. Anyway, they just so happen to be battling right where Bill Ford hid the cattle, to which Bill reveals his plan to Hawks, and there's a shootout between the men. And there's a few panels that go on without Godzilla in it, and it almost makes you forget that you're even reading a Godzilla story. Anyway, Bill's out for blood, but Godzilla sneaks behind him as if he's Batman, which causes Bill to fall to his death. This makes Hawks and the others think that Godzilla is actually an okay monster who saved the day. Hawks even goes out of his way to say that Godzilla not just saved his life, but his ranch as well. You know, the same ranch Godzilla smashed up in the beginning of the issue? Yep, that sure qualifies for saving the ranch. So Godzilla and cowboys. That's not really a duo I'd ever think I'd hear myself say, nor was I even expecting it through the story. I do have to say it's a bit of a downgrade from the previous issues, especially the last one. I mean, you're going from giant bioengineered aliens to some guys on horseback. However, Godzilla battling cowboys at least had me fascinated to see where the concept would be taken and where the writers were going to go with that. And in the end, it's okay. I can't say the direction here really got taken far enough. This two-part tale, like issue 9, is very abstract from the main story, where the action feels meaningless and sometimes forced, a subplot that doesn't really go anywhere, and characters you don't necessarily care for. In fact, our main cast only gets a single page dedicated to them, not really doing anything but saying that they're gonna rest up before chasing after Godzilla again. And there's some brief talk about wanting to get Red Ronin back into the action, but just a heads up, Red Ronin never comes back here, though there was a point where it would have came back, but I'll talk about that later. Overall, issues 15 and 16 don't add much of anything to the story, and are issues you can skim over if you want. Issue 17 gets back on track with S.H.I.E.L.D. going after Godzilla, this time with a new face on board, a fellow by the name of Gladstone Hawkins, a paleontologist who wants to study Godzilla. Aside from owning a museum that we're going to see later, Hawkins is pretty much just resorted to another background character. So the crew try to come up with a way to stop Godzilla without hurting him. Gabe then says if Godzilla wasn't so big, he'd be easy to handle. This sparks an idea with Dum Dum Dugan, who gets in contact with a doctor in New York named Henry Pym. who conjures up a shrinking formula that will minimize Godzilla's height. For those MCU viewers only, if you don't remember who Henry Pym is, he was this guy from Ant-Man. Anyway, Gabe gets the formula, and the crew spot Godzilla sleeping. So the plan is to send the little boy out to try and get Godzilla's attention, believing Rob is the one and only person who can talk to Godzilla. Godzilla wakes up from Rob's call, and the narration box says the voice, while faint, is familiar to Godzilla. I'm not sure how that is, since Robert never spoke one time to Godzilla. If you go back and read the Red Ronin issues, Rob never says a word to Godzilla. He only has internal monologue and never actually says anything. In fact, in their first fight, he's relying on sign language to communicate with Godzilla. So in hindsight, this is the first time Godzilla is actually seeing and hearing Rob. I mean, unless Godzilla somehow knew Rob was inside Red Ronin, but let's not get off track. So Godzilla gets duped into swallowing the formula, and begins shrinking to the size of a cat. He gets captured and taken on board the helicarrier, which is on its way to New York, which carries over into issue 18, where they then make it to Manhattan, and drop the cage which held Godzilla inside. You know, not for nothing, but why is the professor the one holding the cage and not one of the trained agents? And in a convenient fashion happens to be the only one to slip up and toss the cage near the railing to which it opens perfectly to let Godzilla loose. It's like fate planned it that way. The characters then split up to search for Godzilla. They are on a time limit though, as the shrinking formula will not keep Godzilla tiny forever. Godzilla's trip in the Big Apple is as you'd expect. People get freaked out, he drops in a sewer, battles a rat for a short moment, escapes the sewers, and conveniently runs into Rob. I'll repeat, conveniently. In New York City, where there's people around every corner, areas left, right, up and down, where Goji's got other people looking for him, he happens to run into Rob, who coincidentally had no one around him. Oh, and did I mention Rob wasn't even supposed to be looking for Godzilla? Yeah, he escaped the ship seconds beforehand. And of course, the story still wants us to think that Godzilla and Rob are buddies, so Godzilla doesn't attack him and walks off with Rob into the next issue, with the shrinking formula slowly losing its effect. With Godzilla now found, Rob now has to get him back to the ship, of course without trying to scare other people into getting the police involved. It's too bad they weren't walking around Japan, where Rob can just say, "Oh, it's cosplay," like every anime tends to say whenever their wacky characters walk the streets. No, instead Rob takes the Ninja Turtle approach and dresses Godzilla up with a top hat and trench coat. I guess seeing green people with this getup is just a common thing in New York. They make it to the dock, but Godzilla goes on the offense when he believes Dugan and Gabe are rushing in to attack him. And believe it or not, this is one of the more amusing fights in the run. Dugan and Gabe do everything they possibly can to fight back, even using elements in their surrounding environment. I like this one panel right here, where out of context, it looks as though Godzilla is attacking Dugan by presenting himself or something like that. Also, Godzilla's eyes go from red to white for some reason. Jimmy Woo is also here, but he's not going to do anything, because that would mean that he's going to be in a panel without Tamura in it. And of course that's not going to happen, despite the cover of this issue showing him in action. Anyway, this issue ends with the characters losing the fight, and Godzilla walking off. The Shrinking Godzilla storyline is one of the more infamous tales to come out of Marvel Comics. It's one of the subplots the story's best known for. Doug Munch admits that this is one of his favorite moments in the story, but also admits that it received a lot of backlash from both fans and readers alike. The following year, the Hanna-Barbera cartoon would also try their hands out in a Shrinking Godzilla storyline. In the second episode of Season 2, titled Micro Godzilla, with a plot that also shrinks Godzilla down to the size of a rat, which he coincidentally battles one like in the comic. But it's taken to more extreme measures, with Godzilla shrinking down to the size of bacteria, and even having to fight that. And to my awareness, it also seems like that episode is largely disliked. I could see where people are coming from when they express how they don't care for the shrinking Godzilla down to size aspect. In a sense, it is taking away an attribute of the character, his height. It's one of the things that people like him for. It's something that distinguishes him at being an icon. How would you feel if a Batman story was made and the writers took away his costume? Or if a new Mario game came out and the character could never wear red? It would kinda make you feel like something isn't right. I know the shrinking effect isn't permanent, and that is addressed, but Godzilla fighting rats in a sewer instead of a city-stomping kaiju was probably something fans didn't much care for. But that's just me, I can't speak for everyone. Anyway, on to issue 20. So Godzilla's now roaming the streets of New York, and in the dialogue boxes, we get confirmed measurements of him, being 20 feet tall, and before, he was 6 feet tall. I mean, it's nice information, but it's not even information about his normal height. Dum Dum Dugan and Gabe come up with a plan to use flare guns to try and lure Godzilla to the Hawkins Museum, which is a nice callback to issue 2 when they tried a similar plan. Meanwhile, at the Baxter Building, we see the superhero group called the Fantastic Four. For clarity, I already know who this team is, and I'm sure most of you do too, but for the sake of context, you just gotta bear with me here. So this big rock guy called The Thing is watching TV. Whatever program he was watching gets interrupted by a news feed about Godzilla. After noticing the havoc Godzilla is causing, the entire team is then assembled and go off to try and stop him. Wow. Just wow. 16 chapters after the Champions issue, and we're finally seeing superheroes heading into action to do something. I know the creative team behind this project wanted to hold back on overloading the story with superheroes, but I believe they held back a little too much. I mean, we are nearing the end of the story here, and we're just now getting more superheroes. Anyway, the Fantastic Four arrive on the scene to help assist the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Of course, like the champions from earlier, Dugan is not at all thrilled to see them, but is agreeing to their help. So Godzilla manages to get into the museum, but unfortunately the heroes have no idea where he is. I mean, if Marvel's Godzilla has anything going for him, it's definitely being stealthy, as we've seen him do many times before. Now, of course, the Fantastic Four weren't written here to see a plan go through perfectly. In fact, I don't really even know what the plan was once Godzilla got here. But the Big G reveals himself, and a fight breaks out. The Thing manages to hold his own, but accidentally drops Godzilla in a container full of sharks. Issue 21 continues the fight. And okay, I'm sorry, but what museum puts live sharks in its building? And a small container at that with no lid? I mean, who in their right mind would honestly think that's a safe idea? Anyway, Godzilla's being chomped to death by a bunch of man-eaters, but the Thing rushes in to save him. Godzilla, now being unconscious, is lifted away to the Baxter Building, where the heroes then decide to use a time machine that the Fantastic Four just have in their building, to send Godzilla back to prehistoric time. I don't have a comment on that. The plan goes through without a problem, and Godzilla gets back to some random point in prehistoric history. And he actually seems like he likes it there too. But who could blame him? When moments ago, almost everything he was encountering was either trying to hurt or kill him. Not too long after, we see these cavemen, or lizard warriors as they're called, wandering around until they notice Godzilla. They don't seem to like him and send these dinosaurs called the Chargers after him. Godzilla makes short work of them, but soon encounters a more ferocious beast, a red-looking dinosaur known as Devil. And unlike the two Chargers, Devil puts up an actual fight. It doesn't last too long though, as this character named Moonboy notices the Lizardmen army ready to go on the attack. Moonboy stops the fight, realizing he's made a bad mistake. You see, Devil is actually Moonboy's friend, and had him attack Godzilla because he thought he was part of the Lizardmen army. So Moonboy tries to reason with Godzilla into fighting back the army. Godzilla agrees simply because he sees a bit of Robert in Moonboy, just to be a reminder to the viewers that they are best friends. Yep, good old chums. You know, I don't mean to make a big deal out of this, but at this point, Godzilla might as well be like Gamera and be a friend to all children he meets. Speaking of which, if you didn't know like I did, Devil and Moonboy are not original characters to the Godzilla story. They're actually part of their own series called Devil Dinosaur, which was a brand new ongoing comic series at the time. Because of that, I didn't really question why everyone in this time period is able to speak perfect English. Because in that story, there might be a reason on why that is. Also worth noting, Doug Munch, like the Champions issue before, didn't really want to write this section of the story. It was on Marvel's behalf to include Devil Dinosaur in Godzilla, as a way to promote the comic series, which I guess didn't do too hot since it only had 9 issues after cancellation. Anyway, the battle begins in the next issue. Godzilla and Devil hold their own, but there's just too many soldiers coming at them. Moonboy then runs off to set up a plan. Meanwhile, back in present day, our heroes gear up and get ready to go home, with Dum Dum Dugan even stating that he'll oddly miss Godzilla. Rob, of course, freaks out, screaming, "How could they do such a thing? Sending Godzilla back in a time with creatures who will try and kill him?" How does he know that? Plus, Godzilla's gonna regain his height soon anyway, so he's gonna be the biggest creature alive at the time. So what does he have to worry about? There's also a bit of stupid dialogue here, but I'm not even gonna go over it. You can just pause the video here and read it for yourself. Back in time, Moonboy then signals Godzilla and Devil to run to his direction, and the two do so in a fashion that would be more appropriate for a Jackie Chan movie, with the two hurtling over some trap holes. Wow, Godzilla doing hurdles. I never thought I'd see that. Even the narration states that these two just somehow knew to do this. Well, lucky for them, the Lizardmen didn't get the same idea, as they fall into the traps. Soon after, Godzilla begins to glow, and as it turns out, the radiation from Godzilla affected the time machine back in the present time, and it's reversing its effect and bringing Godzilla back into modern time, which does end up happening, and Godzilla is brought back to New York City. To make matters worse, the shrinking formula has completely lost its effect, and Godzilla is back to normal size. But before ending this issue, I do have one teeny tiny thing to comment on. I'm sure you picked up on it after I just brought it up, and I'm going to address it now. So Godzilla can leak radiation. Can we just count the number of times he's made contact with other people and objects? Hell, he even bit Gabe at one point. So yeah, radioactive rabies, anyone? And just now, only now for that matter, does his radiation actually affect something. I'm not worked up over it though, as this is a comic book, and like I said before, radioactivity in comics does anything but hurt people. Quite the opposite, as it makes them superheroes most of the time. Speaking of which, our next issue takes us to the very exciting battle with the Avengers, and I'm sure that won't be a letdown. Thanks for watching. Look forward to the final part.